we know God created work. We see that God created marriage. So we know those two things are good. And they must be able to coexist, because I can't imagine a God who would create two things that actually cannot coexist, things that he said were good. But again, because of the fall, it's difficult. It's hard because for so many reasons, but it is hard to have those things coexist. But one of the things that I've learned is if we can take our cues from God, and if we can really abide in Him and really understand how does God treat us, and that most distinctive feature of God and Christ is that grace, right? That unmerited favor, just the way He deals with us. And I think that one of the ways that we best get work and family to coexist is in all of the relationships that we have, live out that same grace in the relationship with our spouse, in the relationship with our kids, with our coworkers. So that's kind of my first advice to everybody is abide in Christ, really study and understand His grace, understand how does God deal with us. And if we deal with everybody in our life that same way, that sets us up, puts us in a position to enjoy great relationship with people, great health in those relationships. And so in my experience, that's one of the ways that I've found to enjoy the most kind of harmony between all of these things. And a few resources I'd quickly mention, having worked at Family Matters with Dr. Tim Kimmel, he wrote a book called Grace-Based Parenting. He wrote another book called Grace-Filled Marriage. And then Tim and I co-authored a book called Grace at Work. And it's founded on the same model, this kind of applied model of God's grace. And there's different levels at which God's grace operates. And so if you can kind of understand, because God's grace is such an amazing thing, and so if you can study it and understand it, and those are three resources that may help you. It's the same model in all three of those resources. But a couple quick examples is all of our spouse, our kids, we all have these inner needs for a secure love, a significant purpose, and a strong hope. So if we can understand those inner needs and how to meet those in the people around us, and then there's this notion of freedoms, that God grants us freedoms, the freedom to be different, to be who He made us to be, the freedom to be vulnerable, to have emotions, to be candid, to be honest with the people around us, and the freedom to make mistakes. Right? So if you think about those, just that little construct right there, that really creates a gracious atmosphere. And if I can create that in my workplace, and I can create that in my home life, what you find is great health and vibrancy in those relationships. And so that's what I found is if I'm enjoying health and happiness at work, I bring that home, and that makes me easier to live with. And if I can create a gracious environment with my spouse and with my kids, then my kids are thriving, my spouse is thriving, I'm thriving at work. And so those things, those are the three places where we spend the most time in our lives. And so if we can really be ambassadors for Christ in all of those venues, I think we set ourselves up to enjoy more wholeness, but then also for those things to work together, because a lot of times those things come in conflict. So those are a few thoughts on how to do that.